What if everything you've been told about aging legs is wrong? What if weakness, instability, and fear of falling are not a natural part of aging, but a silent result of doing the wrong things? Or worse, doing nothing at all? There are communities of older adults who walk faster, stand stronger, and move with confidence well into their 70s and 80s, not because of genetics, not because of luck, but because they follow a simple, disciplined approach to leg strength that most people completely ignore. And today, you're about to discover it. After the age of 60, one of the most dangerous misconceptions that quietly shapes health outcomes is the belief that muscle loss is simply unavoidable. This assumption has been repeated for decades, yet it is incomplete and misleading. While it is true that aging influences muscle mass, what is often ignored is the powerful role of inactivity, poor movement habits, and lack of resistance in accelerating that decline far beyond what biology alone would dictate. The human body does not weaken simply because time passes. It weakens because it stops receiving the signals that tell it to stay strong. Muscle is not a fixed structure that fades on a strict biological timer. It is an adaptive tissue that responds directly to demand. When a person walks less, stands less, bends less, and challenges their lower body less, the muscles of the legs interpret this as a signal to reduce capacity. The body operates on efficiency, not permanence. If strength is not required, it is gradually reduced to conserve energy. This is not weakness in the traditional sense, it is adaptation. But the consequences of this adaptation after 60 become far more serious because the margin for recovery becomes narrower. What makes this issue more concerning is how silently it develops. There is no immediate alarm when leg strength begins to decline. Instead, the process unfolds in small, almost unnoticeable steps, a slightly slower pace when walking, a moment of hesitation before standing up, a greater reliance on hand support when climbing stairs. These changes are often dismissed as normal aging, but in reality, they are early indicators of muscular deconditioning. By the time they are recognized as a problem, the decline has already progressed significantly. The most critical factor is not age itself, but the absence of progressive load. Muscles require resistance to maintain their structure. Without it, fibers shrink, coordination weakens, and endurance drops. This is particularly true for the large muscle groups of the legs, which are responsible for mobility, balance, and independence. Once these muscles lose strength, the effects extend far beyond movement. Confidence declines. Activity levels drop further. Fear of falling begins to influence daily decisions, creating a cycle that accelerates deterioration. However, the body retains its ability to respond even at an advanced age. This is one of the most underestimated aspects of human physiology. Muscle tissue remains adaptable well into later decades of life, provided it is stimulated correctly. Even simple, controlled movements can trigger a rebuilding response in muscle fibers. The nervous system also plays a crucial role, as it retains the ability to improve coordination and firing patterns long after strength has declined. This means that stability and power are not lost permanently. They are simply underused systems waiting for reactivation. The key misunderstanding is the belief that recovery requires extreme effort. In reality, excessive intensity can be counterproductive for older adults, increasing risk without providing sustainable benefit. What the body responds to most effectively is consistency and controlled engagement. Gentle but repeated activation of the leg muscles sends a clear biological message. Strength is still required. Over time, this message is translated into measurable improvement in muscle density, joint stability, and movement efficiency. Equally important is the relationship between muscle and balance. The legs do not function in isolation. They work in coordination with the hips, core, and nervous system. When one part weakens, the entire system becomes less stable. This is why even small improvements in leg strength can produce noticeable changes in overall mobility. Standing becomes more secure, walking requires less effort, and transitions such as sitting and rising feel more controlled. These are not superficial changes. They reflect deeper neuromuscular adaptation occurring within the body. Another overlooked aspect is the psychological impact of declining strength. As physical confidence decreases, movement becomes more cautious. This caution often leads to reduced activity, which in turn accelerates further loss. Breaking this cycle requires early intervention, not after severe weakness develops, but at the first signs of reduced stability. The longer the delay, the more the body adjusts to inactivity as its new baseline, making reversal slower and more demanding. Even in advanced age, the capacity for improvement remains present, but it responds best when it is challenged in a structured, manageable way that respects joint safety and fatigue limits while still demanding muscular engagement and repetition that signals adaptation is still necessary. The most overlooked truth in senior physical health is that strength is not built through occasional effort, but through repeated, low-impact stimulation that the body can safely interpret and adapt to over time. After 60, the nervous system and muscular system require a different kind of training stimulus than in youth. High strain, sudden overload, or irregular bursts of activity often do not produce sustainable results and can instead increase fatigue, joint stress, or discouragement. What produces real transformation is controlled repetition that the body can tolerate daily without fear of injury or exhaustion. When movement becomes gentle, predictable, and consistent, the body begins to re-establish trust in motion itself. Many older adults unconsciously avoid exertion because of past discomfort, stiffness, or fear of imbalance. This avoidance leads to further weakening, not because the body is incapable, but because it is understimulated. Muscles respond to demand, not intention. If the demand is absent, the body gradually reallocates energy away from strength maintenance. This is why inactivity, even more than aging, becomes the central driver of physical decline. Low-impact repetition works because it targets the neuromuscular system in a safe and progressive way. Each repetition sends a signal through the nervous system, reinforcing coordination between brain and muscle fibers. This process is not immediate, but it is cumulative. With every controlled movement, the body refines its ability to recruit muscle fibers more efficiently. Over time, this leads to improved stability, smoother motion, and reduced effort during daily tasks such as standing, walking, or climbing small elevations. Another important factor is joint preservation. After 60, joints often become more sensitive due to natural wear and reduced synovial fluid activity. High-intensity movements can aggravate this sensitivity, discouraging consistent practice. Low-impact exercises, however, maintain joint mobility without excessive compression or strain. This allows individuals to continue movement routines without interruption, which is essential because consistency is the primary driver of adaptation. The body does not respond strongly to sporadic effort. It responds to rhythm. When movement is performed daily, even in small amounts, the musculoskeletal system begins to anticipate activity rather than react to it. This anticipation reduces stiffness and improves readiness for movement throughout the day. It also enhances blood circulation in the lower limbs, which plays a critical role in nutrient delivery and waste removal from muscle tissue. Better circulation contributes directly to reduced fatigue and improved endurance during standing and walking. One of the most underestimated benefits of low-impact repetition is its effect on balance recovery. Balance is not a static ability. It is a dynamic interaction between sensory feedback, muscle response, and neural processing. When movements are repeated slowly and consistently, the brain refines its ability to interpret spatial position and adjust posture accordingly. This reduces the likelihood of missteps, hesitation, or instability during routine activities. Fear of falling is another major factor that limits mobility in older populations. Once fear develops, movement becomes restricted, and restricted movement leads to further weakness. Low-impact repetition helps interrupt this cycle by creating safe experiences of controlled motion. Each successful repetition reinforces confidence, gradually replacing hesitation with assurance. This psychological shift is just as important as the physical improvements, because confidence determines willingness to stay active. Importantly, low impact does not mean low effectiveness. The key is controlled engagement of large muscle groups, particularly those in the thighs, calves, and hips. These muscles are responsible for supporting body weight and maintaining upright posture. Even minimal resistance applied consistently is enough to trigger adaptation in these areas. The body responds not to intensity alone, but to the presence of challenge combined with recovery capacity. Recovery itself is a critical component often ignored in older training approaches. The body after 60 requires sufficient time to repair and strengthen between sessions. Low-impact routines allow for this recovery without halting progress. Instead of exhausting the system, they maintain it in a state of continuous gentle activation, which is ideal for long-term improvement. Over time, this approach reshapes how the body experiences movement. What once felt difficult begins to feel manageable. What once required effort begins to feel natural. The transition is not sudden but progressive, and it reflects a deeper restoration of physical capability that many assume is no longer possible after a certain age. One of the most misunderstood relationships in aging physiology is the direct connection between leg strength and balance stability. These two systems are often treated as separate concerns, yet in reality, they operate as a single integrated mechanism. When leg strength declines, balance does not fail independently. It deteriorates as a direct consequence of reduced muscular control, slower reflex response, and weakened joint stabilization. This is why falls in older adults are rarely caused by a single misstep, but by an underlying loss of coordinated support that has been developing over time. The human body relies on constant micro-adjustments to remain upright. Every second of standing or walking involves subtle corrections made by the muscles of the feet, ankles, calves, thighs, and hips. These corrections are not conscious actions. They are automatic responses governed by the nervous system. However, when muscle strength declines, these automatic responses become delayed and less precise. The body begins to compensate in inefficient ways, placing additional strain on smaller stabilizing muscles that are not designed to carry long-term load. As this compensation continues, stability becomes fragile. A surface that once felt level may begin to feel uncertain. A movement that once felt simple, such as turning or stepping sideways, begins to require more attention and caution. This is not because the environment has changed, but because the body's ability to interpret and respond to that environment has weakened. The decline in leg strength reduces the margin of safety within which balance operates. The most critical muscles involved in this system are the quadriceps, hamstrings, calves, and gluteal muscles. These muscle groups do not merely generate movement. They stabilize the entire lower body during both motion and stillness. When they are strong, the body can absorb small disturbances without losing alignment. When they are weak, even minor shifts in weight distribution can disrupt equilibrium. This is why strengthening the legs has a direct and measurable effect on reducing fall risk, far beyond what balance-specific training alone can achieve. Another essential factor is reaction speed. Balance is not only about maintaining position, but about recovering it when disrupted. This recovery depends on how quickly muscles can respond to sudden changes in posture. With age, reaction time naturally slows, but this process is significantly influenced by physical conditioning. When muscles are regularly engaged, neural pathways remain active and responsive. When they are not, these pathways lose efficiency, resulting in delayed corrective action during instability. It is also important to recognize the role of sensory feedback in balance control. The feet contain thousands of nerve endings that continuously send information to the brain about surface texture, pressure, and orientation. When leg muscles are weak, posture becomes less stable, and this sensory information becomes less reliable. The brain receives inconsistent signals, making it harder to determine exact body position. Strengthening the lower body improves the quality of this feedback loop, allowing for more accurate and confident movement. Fear plays a silent but powerful role in disrupting balance. Once an individual experiences instability or a minor fall, the anticipation of another event can alter natural movement patterns. Steps become shorter, weight shifts become cautious, and the body remains in a state of partial tension. This guarded movement style further reduces balance efficiency because it prevents full muscular engagement. Over time, this creates a self-reinforcing cycle where fear reduces movement, and reduced movement weakens the system responsible for stability. Breaking this cycle requires restoring trust in movement through controlled, repeatable physical engagement. When the legs are consistently activated through safe, structured motion, the nervous system begins to recalibrate its sense of stability. The body relearns that weight shifts can be managed, that transitions can be controlled, and that upright posture can be maintained without excessive effort. This recalibration does not happen instantly, but it builds gradually through repetition and exposure to safe, load-bearing activity. Environmental interaction also becomes more efficient as leg strength improves. Simple tasks such as navigating uneven ground, stepping onto curbs, or adjusting to changes in flooring become less mentally demanding. This reduction in cognitive load is significant because balance is not purely physical, it is also neurological. When the body becomes more capable, the brain does not need to overcompensate with constant vigilance, allowing for more natural and fluid movement patterns to re-emerge. In advanced stages of weakness, even standing still for extended periods can become fatiguing, not because the act itself is complex, but because the supporting muscles are no longer able to sustain minimal postural demands without continuous effort, forcing the entire system into a state of constant correction that gradually drains endurance and increases instability during even the simplest transitions, which then begins to influence walking rhythm, step consistency, and weight transfer efficiency across uneven surfaces where subtle imbalances accumulate unnoticed until... One of the most underestimated realities of aging physiology is that strength loss in the lower body does not remain isolated to movement alone. It gradually influences every functional aspect of daily life. Standing up from a chair, climbing a few steps, maintaining posture while cooking, or even walking short distances are all dependent on the same foundational system: leg strength and muscular endurance. When this foundation weakens, independence does not disappear suddenly, but it erodes through small, repeated limitations that slowly reshape how life is lived. The process often begins quietly. A person may notice that rising from a seated position requires more effort than before. Hands may begin to assist the thighs. Movements become slightly slower, more deliberate, and less automatic. These changes are rarely alarming in isolation, but collectively they represent a shift in functional capacity. The body is no longer performing tasks efficiently. It is compensating for reduced muscular output. As this compensation increases, energy expenditure rises for even basic activities. What once required minimal effort now demands noticeable exertion. This is not simply fatigue, it is mechanical inefficiency. Weak leg muscles force the body to recruit additional support from the upper body and core, creating imbalance in movement patterns. Over time, this leads to a feeling of heaviness, reduced stamina, and avoidance of unnecessary motion. Avoidance is where decline accelerates most significantly. When movement begins to feel difficult, the natural response is to reduce activity. However, the musculoskeletal system operates on a use it or lose it principle. Reduced movement leads to further weakening, which in turn makes movement even more challenging. This feedback loop is one of the primary reasons mobility declines faster after 60. It is not age alone driving the change, but the progressive reduction of physical engagement. Another critical impact is on joint stability. The knees, hips, and ankles rely on surrounding muscles to absorb load and maintain alignment. When these muscles weaken, joints are exposed to greater stress during routine movement. This can lead to discomfort, stiffness, and reduced range of motion. In response, individuals often unconsciously limit their movement further, which accelerates muscle loss and reduces joint flexibility even more. Endurance also plays a major role in functional independence. Strong legs are not only about lifting power, they are about sustaining activity over time. Walking a short distance may feel manageable, but longer durations reveal underlying fatigue when muscular endurance is low. This limitation often leads to reduced participation in social, physical, and even essential daily activities. Gradually, life becomes more confined not by choice, but by physical restriction. The nervous system adapts to these limitations as well. When movement becomes restricted, neural pathways responsible for coordination and reaction begin to lose efficiency. This results in slower transitions between actions, reduced agility, and less precise motor control. Tasks that require quick adjustments, such as navigating uneven ground or changing direction, become increasingly challenging. Importantly, this decline is not irreversible in its early and moderate stages. The body retains the capacity to respond to renewed demand even after significant reduction in activity. Muscle fibers remain capable of reactivation, and neural pathways can regain efficiency when consistently stimulated. However, this responsiveness depends entirely on reintroducing controlled physical challenge in a structured manner that the body can safely tolerate. The most effective approach is not aggressive exertion but gradual re-engagement. When the legs are exposed to consistent, manageable load, the body begins to rebuild strength in a way that prioritizes stability and function. This process restores not only muscular capacity, but also confidence in movement. As strength returns, previously difficult tasks begin to feel manageable again, reducing dependency and restoring autonomy in daily life. Psychologically, this restoration has a profound impact. Regaining the ability to move without hesitation or assistance reinforces a sense of control over one's own body. This confidence directly influences willingness to remain active, which further supports physical improvement. The relationship between physical strength and mental assurance becomes mutually reinforcing, creating a cycle of recovery rather than decline. The critical distinction lies in timing. Early intervention leads to faster and more complete recovery, while delayed response allows compensatory patterns to become deeply ingrained, making reversal slower and more demanding, particularly when inactivity has already redefined what the body accepts as normal capacity, leading to a situation where even modest improvements require consistent effort, sustained over time without interruption. The most decisive factor in long-term mobility after the age of 60 is not strength alone, but consistency. Many individuals mistakenly believe that physical improvement comes from occasional bursts of effort, short periods of exercise followed by long periods of rest. In reality, the human body does not respond effectively to irregular stimulation. It responds to rhythm, repetition, and predictability. Without consistent movement signals, the muscular and nervous systems gradually shift toward inactivity as their default state. Consistency works because it aligns with how the body maintains adaptation. Muscle tissue is not static. It is constantly undergoing a cycle of breakdown and repair. When movement is regular, even at a low intensity, the body receives continuous signals to preserve and rebuild muscle fibers. When movement is inconsistent, this signaling becomes disrupted, and the body prioritizes energy conservation over strength maintenance. Over time, this leads to measurable reductions in muscle density, endurance, and functional capacity. What makes consistency especially powerful in older adults is its effect on neuromuscular memory. The connection between the brain and muscles is not fixed. It strengthens or weakens based on usage. Regular movement reinforces this connection, allowing signals to travel more efficiently from the nervous system to the muscles. This improves coordination, reduces hesitation, and enhances the smoothness of movement. When this connection weakens due to inactivity, even simple tasks begin to feel effortful and less controlled. Another critical aspect of consistency is its influence on recovery capacity. After 60, the body requires more time to recover from physical strain, but it also requires regular stimulation to maintain function. Consistent, moderate activity strikes this balance effectively. It provides enough demand to maintain adaptation while avoiding excessive fatigue that could interrupt recovery cycles. This balance is essential for sustainable improvement. Inconsistent activity, on the other hand, places the body in a cycle of repeated adaptation and regression. Each time movement is reintroduced after a long gap, the body must readjust from a lower baseline, which is less efficient and more physically demanding. This repeated restart process slows progress and increases the likelihood of discomfort or discouragement. Over time, this pattern often leads to reduced motivation and further inactivity. Consistency also plays a major role in joint health. Joints depend on movement to circulate synovial fluid, which nourishes cartilage and reduces friction. Regular motion maintains this lubrication process, preserving flexibility and comfort. When movement is sporadic, joints remain inactive for extended periods, leading to stiffness and reduced range of motion. This stiffness often discourages further movement, reinforcing inactivity and accelerating decline. Equally important is the psychological dimension of consistency. Repeated success in completing manageable physical activity builds confidence. This confidence is not superficial. It directly influences behavior. When individuals feel capable of movement without pain or excessive effort, they are more likely to continue engaging in activity. This sustained engagement becomes the foundation for long-term physical resilience. Fear of injury often disrupts consistency more than physical limitation itself. Many older adults reduce activity after experiencing discomfort, assuming rest will resolve the issue. While short-term rest may be necessary, prolonged inactivity often worsens the underlying problem. Muscles weaken, stiffness increases, and confidence declines. A consistent, controlled approach prevents this cycle by maintaining a stable level of activity that the body can adapt to safely. The most effective form of consistency is not intensity-based, but habit-based. When movement becomes part of daily routine, rather than a separate task, it requires less mental resistance and becomes easier to sustain. This habitual engagement ensures that the body receives continuous stimulation, which is essential for maintaining strength, balance, and coordination over time. Importantly, consistency does not require complexity. Simple, repeated movements performed regularly are far more effective than complex routines performed inconsistently. The body values repetition over variety when the goal is stability and strength maintenance. Each repeated movement reinforces structural integrity within muscles and strengthens neural efficiency, gradually improving overall physical capacity without overwhelming the system. Over extended periods, consistency produces compounding effects. Small daily actions accumulate into significant physiological change. Strength improves gradually, balance becomes more reliable, and endurance increases without dramatic effort spikes. This slow accumulation is what makes consistency uniquely powerful. It builds resilience that is stable, sustainable, and deeply integrated into daily function rather than dependent on short-term motivation or sporadic effort.